Hello, and welcome to For the Kingdom and Glory. I'm your host, Dr. Shannon Gibson. Today, we're in our ninth message on the end times. It's Revelation chapter 7 and part of chapter 8 about the seventh seal and the 144,000 witnesses. In just a brief review, I'm not going to reteach the last message, but chapter 6 involved Jesus opening the first six seals. And if you remember the first four seals, John sees the four horsemen of the apocalypse, the horseman of conquest, the one of war, of famine and economic disaster, and then the one death. And so most people believe that the first four horsemen are released over a series of months or maybe even into a couple of years. And the earth is basically in this catastrophic realignment of countries conquering each other, joining alliances, and war breaking out, and all these bad things of famine and pestilence and death that go along with all that. And then the fifth seal, we see that all of these Christians are slain for their testimony. And then the sixth seal, we see this terrible cataclysm happen on earth. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the sixth seal in a second. But all this happens immediately prior to chapter 7. So I want to remind you of two things I've said before that are very important. First off, Revelation switches frequently between John viewing things in heaven and on earth. And when he sees things in heaven, he doesn't necessarily see all the details happening on earth, and vice versa. And so the first five seals, when they are opened, John is in heaven viewing things from heaven's point of view. So that's why he sees that the horsemen, what color the horses are and what the riders are like and what their authority is. And then he sees all these Christians that have been killed show up at the altar. And then when the sixth seal is opened, he turns his viewpoint toward earth. And so it's important to realize that in chapter 7, he's still looking at the earth. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. The second thing I want to remind you of is that the chapter and verse divisions are not original to the text. You may say, well, what does that matter? Well, it's great that they were put in there because instead of saying go to the middle of the book and look for the sentence, you can say, go to chapter 7, verse 1, and everybody's in the same place. But we tend to see the chapters as episodic, and they're not. The book was written as a whole. And so it's very important that as you read the end of the sixth seal and go into chapter 7, that you realize that it's a continuation. And so I just want to remind you that the sixth seal, because this is very important, the sixth seal involved an earthquake that moved every mountain and island on the earth. It didn't destroy them, but it moved them out of their place. That is a powerful earthquake. Also, there was some kind of astrological catastrophe that happened. The text tells us that there was both a full eclipse of the sun during that day, and then that night there was a blood moon, which can't happen with how the astrological bodies move now. That would be 14 days apart. A full eclipse of the sun can only happen at the new moon, and a blood moon can only happen at the full moon. And like I said, that has to happen 2 weeks apart. But something terrible happens on the earth when this earthquake happens that allows these things to happen in the same day. And then we're told that the skies rolled up like a scroll. We're not exactly told what that means. We get a little bit better viewpoint here in chapter 7 that we're about to read. But one of the main things that happens is that the world acknowledges God's judgment. And I want to read to you the last couple of verses of chapter 6 just so I can set the stage for chapter 7 again. It says, then the kings of the earth, the nobles, the commanders, the rich, and the mighty, and every slave and free man hid in the caves and among the rocks of the mountains. And they said to the mountains and the rocks, fall on us and hide us from the face of the one seated on the throne and from the wrath of the Lamb. For the great day of their wrath is come, and who is able to withstand it? So a lot of times when people teach Revelation, because they teach it in an episodic fashion, and sometimes they'll teach that the order of it may be out of order, they look at these verses and they think almost that people on earth could be fooled into thinking that this is just a series of accidents and disasters and not even realize that there's a cosmic battle here or of the ages, so to speak, where God is judging humanity and the earth. And so they almost make it like it's a secret end times, like all these terrible things are happening, but nobody knows. But clearly chapter 6 shows that that is not accurate. It says kings and nobles and the wealthy and the free and the slaves. In other words, they're saying everybody. everybody on earth acknowledges on the day this happens that they're looking at the one, because remember, the sky's rolled up so they can see into heaven. That was very clear in chapter 6. And they are saying that they know that God is judging the earth. And so, rolling that back and taking it to its logical conclusion, the first four seals, the four horsemen, the warfare, the conquest, all these nations realigning, and then the fifth seal with all of these Christians dying or being killed for their witness, and then the sixth seal with this terrible judgment, people realize now by the sixth seal that God is judging the earth. And so that's very important as we get into chapter 7, because chapter 7 takes a little bit of an interlude before we get to the seventh seal. So remember, Jesus has opened the six seals of the scroll, but there's a seventh one that continues, but chapter 7 kind of sits in between that. And so chapter 7 begins. This is verses 1 through 8. I'll start there. After this, I saw four angels. So after what? So it's saying after the sixth seal, I saw four angels standing on the four corners of the earth, holding back the four winds of the earth, so that no wind might blow on the earth or sea or against any tree. Then I saw another angel ascending from the rising of the sun with the seal of the living God, and he called with a loud voice to the four angels who had been given power to harm the earth and the sea, saying, Do not harm the earth or the sea or the trees until we have sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. And I heard the number of the sealed, 144,000, sealed from every tribe of the sons of Israel. So after the sixth seal, there's no wind blowing. It says the four angels are standing at the four corners of the earth, but it's saying they're standing out there and they're holding back the winds. In other words, the wind can't blow. So there can't be any weather. If fronts can't move, clouds can't move, then weather's not happening on the earth. And that in and of itself would be catastrophic. But they're holding it back because they're holding back for the judgment that's about to happen. You may say, what judgment? When we get into chapter 8, you're going to see the trumpet judgments next, and they get progressively worse between the seals, the trumpets, and then the bowls of the wrath of God. And so these angels are holding back the wind, and another angel says, hey, don't harm anything yet, because I've got to seal the servants of God. And he goes and he seals 144,000 people, 12,000 each from these 12 tribes of Israel. And remember, a seal, we talked about this, probably the best image to have in your mind, or the image I have in my mind, I don't know if it's the best image, is that, in like the Middle Ages, they would put a dollop of wax on a letter, and then they would punch a metal seal on top of it, and it would give a raised three-dimensional image of a house emblem or a flag or something of that nature. And so whatever this seal has in it, it's like God's touching their forehead with her. The angel is touching the forehead of these people with God's seal. And I think it's, I've always imagined as being like a raised emblem saying that they belong to the Lord. Also, when you see a list like this in the Bible, there's a list of these 12,000, which tribes they come from. Always read the list. Sometimes we have a tendency to skip the begots and the numbers and the things like that, but sometimes you can get some hidden nuggets in there. So it says 12,000 from the tribe of Judah were sealed, 12,000 from the tribe of Reuben, 12,000 from the tribe of Gad, 12,000 from the tribe of Asher, 12,000 from the tribe of Naphtali, 12,000 from the tribe of Manasseh, 12,000 from the tribe of Simeon, 12,000 from the tribe of Levi, 12,000 from the tribe of Issachar, 12,000 from the tribe of Zebulun, 12,000 from the tribe of Joseph, and 12,000 from the tribe of Benjamin were sealed. And you may say, well, why'd you read through that list? Well, if you look very carefully, Israel, Jacob, had 12 sons that became the 12 tribes of Israel. And there's a lot of back and forth between Bible scholars about who's not on the list and who is. But if you look very carefully, if you compare the list with the sons of Israel, you'll realize that there were 12 sons, and they're listed here with the exception of one. Dan is not listed. And Bible scholars argue over why that is. And he's replaced by Joseph's son, Manasseh, because you'll see that Joseph is in the list. He was one of the sons, but Manasseh was actually a grandson. And so back when they divided the land amongst the tribes of Israel, Joseph was the favored son. The favored son got what's called a double portion. And so each of Joseph's sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, got their own tribal land and became their own tribe in Israel. The tribe of Levi was given no land because they were the priestly tribe. So for some reason, the tribe of Dan is left off this list, as is the tribe of Ephraim, which was Joseph's son, and Joseph's name is substituted back in. Bible scholars argue over why that was. But it's one of those hidden nuggets you can look at for yourself because it's not part of our study here in Revelation. So I'm going to move on to the next set of verses. But just it's very important that the angels here are holding back weather on the earth. The servants of God get sealed, and these sealed servants of God do not have to go through the judgments that are going to happen on the earth. And we're going to see a lot more about that later. So John has been looking and he's seeing what's happening on earth. Then he switches back to heaven. And it says, after this, after what? After the 6 seals, after these servants are sealed, these 144,000, we don't know how much time takes place, but I think it's a good bit because I think these 144,000 basically go and evangelize the earth. Now, keep in mind, many Christians have already died in the 5th seal, and they were told your number's not fulfilled yet. In other words, there's going to be more of you. And so this is where it gets interesting because the world acknowledged in the 6th seal that this was God's judgment. So in that same time, they're acknowledging all the people they killed were God's people. And yet, look what happens. It says, after this, I looked, and behold, a great multitude that no one could number, from every nation, from all tribes and people and languages, standing before the throne and before the Lamb, clothed in white robe with palm branches in their hands, crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. Now, this is the same throne room John's been standing in where he's already told us there's 100 million angels there. And he gave us that number. But when he looked at this number of people, he said, the number's so great I can't count them. The man's already counted 100 million standing here of angels, but he said there's even more people, which, is not hard to believe. There's billions of people on the earth. And so obviously a good many of them show up here. And just as when we talked about in the 5th seal, these are the ones that are beheaded for the testimony of Jesus and for their witness. And so they start singing this or crying out with a loud voice, salvation belongs to God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. And all the angels were standing around the throne and around the elders and the 4 living creatures, and they fell on their faces before the throne and worshiped God, saying, Amen. Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. Amen. So John looks back. He's looked away to the earth. Now he looks back and he sees that to their number has been added this great multitude of people that are, witnesses for the Lord that have come out of the earth. And it says, one of the elders addressed me saying, who are these clothed in white robes and from where have they come? And I said to him, sir, So in other words, he's saying, John, you looked away and now you're looking back. And where did all these people come from? And he said, And then he said to me, these are the ones coming out of the great tribulation. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb. Therefore, they are before the throne of God and serve him day and night in his temple. And he who sits on the throne will shelter them with his presence. They shall hunger no more, neither thirst any more. The sun shall not strike them, nor any scorching heat. For the Lamb is in the midst of the throne and will be their shepherd, and he will guide them to the springs of living water. And God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. That last part you will hear that passage read a lot of funerals and things, and it is a great promise, but it's actually specifically for those Christians who have come out of the Great Tribulation. So I want to point this out because this is where people start to really get some different viewpoints of Revelation. I've already told you that I believe Revelation is roughly in order, but because John is looking from heaven to earth back and forth, I think a lot of times some of the details of what is happening on earth are not given to us until later. And so we know that during this time there are 2 witnesses on the earth. You may say, well, where did you get that? You'll get that out of chapter 11 because God's going to have John look at what's going on the earth then, and he kind of backdates how many days things have been going on. Then on chapter 13, you're going to meet a man called the Antichrist. And so the Antichrist, the false prophet, these 2 witnesses that stand for God, they've been on the earth the entire time, and their actions have been moving. And so that's where you're getting these large group of people that are martyred, along with this 144,000 that were just sealed. Now you're saying, well, you're throwing out a lot of numbers and a lot of people. The key to understanding Revelation is once you've read it through and you've read through the book of Daniel, read through all that, all these prophecies, is that you have to start putting it together and realize that God is not telling you a confusing story. He's telling you a story that you have to dig and try to understand and pray about. And so as John sees this happen, as he sees the angels hold back the wind, and they seal the servants of God. Then he turns around and he realizes there's all these martyrs in the throne room, even more so than at the fifth seal. The next thing that happens is that the seventh seal, remember we started at the sixth seal and now we're at the seventh, is about to be opened. So John's attention is fully in heaven. So in Revelation 8, verses 1 through 5, it says, when the Lamb opened the seventh seal, there was silence in heaven for about half an hour. Imagine God opening something and there's 100 million angels standing there. There's so many people, John can't count them. And then all of a sudden there's silence. What did they see in the document? Because the seventh seal is open, that means the document is fully visible. They can see what is going to happen fully in front of them. And it brings them to complete silence as they stand in the presence of God. It says, then I saw 7 angels who stand before God, and 7 trumpets were given to them. And another angel came and stood at the altar with a golden censer, and he was given much incense to offer with the prayers of all the saints on the golden altar before the throne. And the smoke of the incense with the prayers of the saints rose before God from the hand of the angel. And the angel took the censer and filled it with fire from the altar and threw it onto the earth. And there were peals of thunder, rumblings, flashes of lightning, and an earthquake. So Jesus, the Lamb, opens this seventh seal, and people can now fully see the document and the plan for the end. This is what Daniel saw, that God said it would be sealed up into the end times. And Daniel had seen this fully, and now John and everybody standing in heaven can see it fully, and they are silent. Daniel's reaction was that he got sick when he saw it. And so these 7 angels that stand before God are given 7 trumpets. And as we go into next time when we meet, we'll talk about the first few of those trumpets. But these trumpets are judgments. And then there's another angel that comes on the scene, and he grabs a golden censer and offers incense and prayer before God. Now, you may not be familiar with what a censer is, but it's like a dish, and a lot of times it would be on a staff, and they would put incense and various things in it and burn it, and it would smoke. And incense will give like a sweet smelling aroma. And so they're saying the prayers of the saints are like incense. But I kind of want you to understand the dimensions here. We know that this is in the throne room of God, and we know from the book of Nahum that they're saying, the book of Nahum tells us that the clouds are like the dust of God's feet. When Isaiah saw the Lord, he was standing in the temple, and he said the train or the back of God's robe filled the temple. The idea being that God was very large. And so anything around him, the altar, the censers, and all this would be very large. And so it's saying that after he offered this incense, the angel filled up the censer with fire or possibly coals from the altar, and he threw it down to the earth. And the impact the censer made with the earth, it coming through the atmosphere, it made thunder and rumbles and flashes of lightning. It caused this big storm, and it causes another earthquake. And so what is happening here is the document is fully opened, and the next thing that's going to happen is these 7 trumpets. These angels are going to blow these 7 trumpets in judgments. And the book of Revelation will move very quickly through these judgments. So read the rest of chapter 8 and into chapter 9, and next time we'll discuss the 7 trumpets. May the Lord bless you and keep you, and may his kingdom come and his will be done on earth as it is in heaven.